Welcome to the Andrew Holland Podcast, where we explore the stories of successful people, get insight and advice from individuals who have accomplished amazing things, and dive deep into understanding ourselves as human beings. Now, here's your host, Andrew Holland.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Andrew Holland Podcast. Joining us today, we have founding member and partner of Potere Search, Nick Morrison. Nick, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
So you have a really interesting story. I always love to figure out, how did you get into the field or industry that you're in? Your Potere Search is an executive recruiting firm, so you help people find good employees for executive positions or even just general labor, correct?
Yeah, it's primarily corporate roles. So you
Okay.
think of like your accounting function, your HR function, your marketing, your customer service.
So you have a really unique story on what brought you into the executive recruiting industry. Share that with us and then use that as a basis to bring us to how you started your own company and how you got to where you are today with Potere Search.
Yeah. In 2012, I moved to Phoenix with a suitcase, my golf clubs, and a backpack. Like I never leave anywhere without my golf clubs. So I've got those. And I had no idea what I was going to do when I came to Phoenix. I didn't have a job. I was staying in my aunt and uncle's spare bedroom. I didn't have a car, so I was like taking cabs and the bus to interviews.
Where'd you move from?
Boise, Idaho was
Okay.
the last place I lived right before here. And I met with a recruiter. What I thought was to like find a job. So I wanted to go into corporate finance. I was looking for a corporate finance role. So I was talking to this recruiter and I showed up to an interview one day. It was like the first week that I was in Phoenix, maybe the second week I was in Phoenix. And I met with this recruiter and I sat down and it was an hour-long interview. And for 15 minutes, they talked to me about becoming a recruiter. They're like, here's what it's like to be a recruiter. And we change lives every day. And here's what it is. And here's what we're creating. And at the end of the 50 minutes, they asked me, they're like, so do you have any questions? I'm like, yeah, we're all the corporate finance jobs. And so they asked me, they're like, well, you know, on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you feel about this opportunity? Which is a common recruiter question. Yep. And I'm like, probably 2.5. But, you know, I was less than a 1 before we started. So we're heading in the right direction.
That's a great response, by the way.
Yeah, I was like 23 years old. Like, as a young kid when I said that. But
so you were thinking you were interviewing for a corporate finance position somewhere. And really, they wanted you to be an executive recruiter and help them find different individuals to fill corporate roles.
You're exactly right. Yeah. And so I'm walking out of the interview, right? So we're walking out of the building and they had this sign on the wall that said, "We change lives every day." And as we were walking out, they were like, "Hey, if you're interested in the position, give me a call tomorrow or whenever, and we can move to a second interview." And so as that night I was thinking about it, I'm like, maybe they're onto something. Maybe they are actually changing lives every day and maybe I can have an impact with people through this work.
What did you go to school for? Finance?
Finance.
And you had no idea that the role that you were being interviewed for had nothing to do with finance, really?
I had no idea.
Okay, so had you known what executive recruiting was prior to this interview?
The one and only experience I had with a recruiter before was at a job fair in college. And I was so confused about what it was. Because I remember showing up at this job fair looking for a job. And these recruiters in there, they're like, well, you can come and be a recruiter and you help people find jobs. And I'm like, well, no, I need a job. And they were like, no, this is your job, is helping people. And it didn't make any sense to me. I didn't know.
So after that interview, knew nothing about that industry. It's such a shift that you would even consider something you knew nothing about. And it was simply because of that motto, "We change lives every day." Did you think about, okay, what does it mean to be an executive recruiter? Would I be any good at this? Like, that's such a fast change. If you're going into corporate finance, you want to go into corporate finance. And now all of a sudden an opportunity comes to you, something you didn't even think about. And that night you're like, okay, let's do it.
Keep in mind, I'm living in my aunt's spare bedroom.
That's fair.
With no job. No,
Okay, there you go.
I was in a different position,
Yeah.
but I thought they may be onto something. Like I thought that may be true. And I was going to, the job that they were talking to me about doing was recruiting within corporate tax. And so even though I wasn't a tax practitioner, it was still somewhat in the world of corporate finance, or I could still speak the language. And so there was some kind of connection there, but it was primarily about helping people have a better career and a better life. I had a very, very short career in corporate finance before that, and I had the
Oh,
most miserable experience. I had a health episode that happened. And so what I thought is that I could help people avoid what I just went through, and I could help connect people to good work.
there's the why. Okay, so you had been in corporate finance, had a poor experience, and when you saw that, it resonated with you that you could help other people do that. You didn't particularly like that corporate finance. Was it the culture of the company or was it the nature of the work itself?
Both.
Both. Okay. So you were already looking to make a change. Okay, now talk to us. You take the role.
Hmm.
Are they surprised by this?
Surprised that I took it.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, they're probably not.
Okay.
They're recruiters, so
Yeah.
they're like, they come on board. Yeah.
Talk to us about what your experience was that was with a bigger firm and then how you ultimately ended up going out on your own.
Yeah. So I actually worked for 3 different firms before I started my company. But that one, it was funny when I first started there. There were these, they called them candidate description sheets. They were like the description sheets that we filled out when we were doing interviews.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember on the date on there, I would only put the day and the month. I never put the year, because I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be doing this for a long time,
Okay.
anyways.
So you still weren't
I
sure.
still wasn't sure, but so my backstop was, or my insurance policy was, hey, if this doesn't work out, I'll see all of the great jobs that are coming by. I'll know how to interview. I'll know how to land these, and then I'll just take one of those jobs. And it was shortly after a year that I had been with the company. It was the first person that I helped place, the first person that I helped hire. And she called me right after her 1 year anniversary, and she was like, Nick, I just had my 1 year anniversary. And I'm like, fantastic, that's great. Like, how is it? And she's like, I just got back from vacation. I got to take my family on vacation. And I'm, wonderful. Where did you go? I'm not thinking anything of it. And she stops me dead in my tracks, and she's like, no, you don't understand. I just got to take my family on vacation. You see, at that last company that I worked at, I didn't have enough money. I didn't make enough money in order to do this. My family doesn't have enough money to do it on their own. And even if I did have the money, they wouldn't give me the time off to go. You see, I just got to connect with my family. My family just got to connect, and that never would have been possible without you. Thank you so much. And I was just totally speechless.
Yeah.
But at that moment, I decided that this was the work for me. And what solidified it was like the next day or 2 days later, her boss called me, and he was like, Nick, she just celebrated her 1 year anniversary. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. Congratulations. How's it going? And I remember him telling me, his name was Tom, and he told me, he was like, she's the new gold standard of hiring in our department. Like, my life is easier, my work life is easier. Thank you so much. It never would have been possible without you. And that solidified it. And I'm like, okay, now we're onto something. And there have been some more stories like that over the
Mm-hmm.
years, but that was the one that I started putting the years on the end of the candidate description sheets after that, because I knew that was for me.
And that was 1 year into this new role that you were in.
Yeah, shortly after that.
Why do you think you were able to find a candidate at that early point, not only in your career, but in your life? You're still only 24. That meant so much to them.
A lot of luck and hard work. So I remember on that role, working hard on it. It was one of the first positions I got to work on. So it's like one of my first roles. I took it really seriously, worked hard. And then there was probably an element of luck to that as well, because I'm just starting out and I'm
Yeah.
just trying, and I
Yeah.
did it.
But how did you know you'd never done this before? How did you know what characteristics to look for? That because anybody can place someone, but not anybody can place the right someone. How did you know that she would be a good fit for this?
What I realized over the years is that I start by talking to people about their dream job. And that's what I did with her then as well. I'm like, what do you want to do? What do you want out of your career? What type of position do you want? What's ideal? I know what they're qualified for. I can see your resume. That
Yeah.
makes sense. But what do you really want to do? And this is really what she wanted to do. And so it seemed like she was very well qualified, one of the top people. So it just seemed like a natural fit. But that's what it's kind of come down to as I reflect. It's just talking to people about their dream jobs. Like, what's the ideal role for you? What do you really want to do? What lights your fire? And then let's go do that.
In this particular case, and I recognize this was she making a lateral move? Was she moving up? Was she in? What was her position?
Yeah, so it was tax. She worked at one of the big four public accounting firms, and then she went in-house at one of the largest privately held companies in the country. And so it was a lateral title, but you could say it was a bit of a promotion since it was a change in role.
So as you've done this now, going on how many years?
12 years now.
What point did you realize, you know what, I want to start my own company and
Yeah.
I want to do this under my own shingle?
The idea first sparked at that first firm that I worked at. So I was there for 3.5 years. And I had first started thinking about it then, because there's been some people that have left and started their own firms, and I was starting to learn about the industry, and that was a common thing for people to do, is to branch out and start their own, either as an individual, just recruiting on your own, or starting a firm and having people around. So I first started thinking about it then, but I didn't think I had enough experience or education. And this is just my thought process. So
Yeah.
I'm like, I've been with one company, I've done one type of role. Maybe I need to learn some other types of recruiting, and maybe I need to get some other education. I was young, I didn't, all these different things. So I went to work at a second recruiting firm, and I really enjoyed it. We were like the second fastest growing recruiting firm at the anyways, it was just a lot of fun to like really grow. And I'd thought about it a lot more then, about starting my own company and doing something on my own. And then somebody had recruited me for the third firm that I worked at, and it really was my dream job. The description and what they said and everything, they were like, this is in what they're doing. I'm like, this is perfect. I can't imagine this is even possible. And they were like, what is it going to do to take you? And I laid out 5 things, and they were like, great, you got them all. And so I went to work there, and I remember telling myself, I'm like, I will either work here forever, or I will never work in the industry again. That was the conversation that I had, because I'm like, if this is the way that recruiting firms operate, I think as a firm, I just wasn't really attached to how they were working. I love the work.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, if this firm that's saying the things that they're saying and advertising the things that they're saying, like, this has got to be the way to do it. Like, this has got to be the way. And if it doesn't work here, if this isn't it, then I just don't even know if I want to be in the industry anymore.
What were those things? Because this is now your third firm.
Yeah.
And they obviously stood out from the rest of the other firms that you were working at. Can you be specific about what you identified there that made you so black and white? Either I'm doing this the rest of my life, or I'm never doing this again.
Nobody ever talked about connection and quality and dream jobs. Nobody ever talked about like, hey, we really, all of the measurement was about money
In previous firms.
But
in this firm, that's where you first were introduced to this idea of your dream job.
No, they talked about it. No. So they had this, like, the concept was great. So it was about connecting people to the work, that meaningful work, or work that matters to them, or something like that. And that's what it was all about. But there really was no measurement to that. There was no tool to actually make that happen. So it was really marketing material. And it just, I don't know. I guess I never gave up on that idea of starting something. And so even I worked at that firm for a while, and I realized that this was all smoke and mirrors, as some people may say, or, we're marketing one thing and doing another thing. And I guess I never left that idea of like starting my own thing. And it just, happened to like dawn on me at this point of like, man, maybe I should go and do it on my own, and maybe I have a concept.
So you've been at one firm, you've been at a second firm, you've been at a third firm.
Yeah.
You had this idea of being an entrepreneur, starting something on your own in the first firm. What's the time period between when you first got into the industry to when you went out on your own?
7 years. I think that's right. Yeah, somewhere between 6 and 7 years.
And why do you have entrepreneurs in your family, or why did this stick with you?
Yeah, my dad owned and operated his own business for most of his life.
Okay.
And I have huge respect for my dad, and he's definitely a mentor for me in my life. And so that was probably where the seed got planted, with him. And then, which is funny, because when I went to go start my business, he told me not to do it. He's really supportive of me. Like, he loves the business today, and we talk about it a lot and stuff, but he was like, son, this is a tough life. Don't do it. I want you to avoid it. So it's kind of funny when that happened.
And you ignored his advice.
Of course.
Yeah. Which I heard, I hear that story so frequently. I was just talking to a neighbor of mine. They came over from Kosovo and Serbia in late 1900s or late 1990s. Basically, the whole family almost lost their lives. But anyway, his dad lost everything over there when they had to become a refugee here. And so they got to the United States, and they had the entrepreneurial motivation, and they wanted to do it. And he said, absolutely not. They didn't listen either, and they ended up doing it. Now he's very supportive. Why do you think that is? After you've done this for going on how many years have you been in your own?
Over 6 years.
Okay. If someone asked you that question, would that be your advice to them? Stay away.
No, it wouldn't be my advice to them, but I totally understand when my dad said that to me, because it's a tough road. I've never worked more hours than I've worked now, and for most of these 6 years, I made less money
Mm-hmm.
than I've like maybe ever made before. And so it's a tough road. It's not easy, and I think my dad was trying to save me from a lot of that difficulty.
Yeah, they don't want to see their children go through the same thing they did.
Yeah.
What do you wish that you knew at the very beginning that you've had to learn the hard way? And I ask this, there are tons of our listeners that feel trapped in a corporate job at whatever stage they are in their life. It can be in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. And it is the fear of the unknown primarily. There's all sorts of excuses we all make, family responsibilities. Not that those aren't legitimate reasons and things you definitely need to take into consideration. But if there's one thing that it boils down to is typically fear of the unknown. That's in everything in life, right? But particularly jumping into your own business and becoming an entrepreneur. So for those listening who want to do what you did in whatever industry they want to be in, whatever their dream industry is, what can you tell them that you know now after 6 years that had you known at the very beginning wouldn't have made it easier, because nothing really makes it easier, but would have at least set your expectations in a different position, so it mentally could have been easier, if anything?
Focus.
uh, Give some more color. What do you mean by that?
When I first started this company, we were out to solve a huge problem. Like, we wanted to solve work, how people do it, what it means to them. Like, we wanted to solve all of work, and I just don't know if that's possible, I think, for us. And so we had, over the course of 6 years, I mean, we started an HR outsource business. We started a couple SaaS products, and so we were doing a lot of different things, and it's really difficult in order to do a lot of different things with little to no resources at the very beginning. And so that's the biggest thing that I've had to learn over time, is that riches are in the niches. It's kind of a saying that, I heard a couple years.
I love that saying.
And I had to learn it the hard way. People gave me that advice, by the way, at the beginning, and I just didn't listen to it. But it was something that I had to learn the hard way.
That's the epitome of my story as well, and I still struggle with it. It is, I think, we've talked about this on the podcast all the time. I think entrepreneurs are born; they're not made. And so those that have that genetic bug and ultimately do something entrepreneurial are always tempted with what I call the shiny object syndrome. Number one, kind of to your point, how old were you when you went out on your own?
28.
Okay, so still relatively young,
Yeah.
especially for us as males. We still have that naivete of we can solve the world and conquer the world and fix everything, which is a great and beautiful thing. But you eventually have to mature past that, and you realize, oh, okay, maybe that's not how the world works. But for you, what did it take for you to realize and experience for yourself and kind of set aside that shiny object syndrome? Was it simply your lack of time, lack of resources, mental volatility while trying to do so many things takes a huge toll? What specifically, and at what point in your business, year 3, 4, 5, did you say, you know what, we got to stop, we got to get out of this, we got to get out of this, and we need to focus on our competitive advantage and just do this?
The end of year 4.
And you knew that right off the top of your head. So there's a story there.
Yeah,
Share that with us.
I ran out of money.
Okay.
It was that year, during the year 4, was kind of the peak of when we had this HR business, and we were doing all of these different things, and we lost a lot of money. And it was just like revenue was going up, but the money that we were spending was exceeding that. And I just looked at it, and it wasn't going to work. I looked at my future in the next 3 to 6 months, and something was going to seriously break. So money was a big part of it. I was also really unhappy at that time as well. I wasn't excited. I was really pretty lost too. And I'm like, what am I supposed to be doing here? We started trying to solve this huge goal and this whole mission, and maybe we have to focus, or maybe it's not possible. And it was just really this feeling of like loss. I don't know what direction to go to. So something really had to change. And then I joined this organization called EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. I'm in their accelerator program. And through that, that was really the first time that I had the mirror held up to me, and that really of like, here's what the business looks like, and here's what it's like. And that's when we really started professionalizing our operations. And that really helped me get focused and, quite honestly, save the business.
So if someone's in that same position that you were in at the end of year 4, give us 2 to 3 pieces that you learned either through EO, through experience, through holding that mirror up, that you can give us so that other people don't have to learn the hard way.
Yeah, one of the exercises that we did was ending something beautiful. There was this like weird exercise about giving a puppy away, or like any puppy, because this puppy is like very beautiful and you like it and it's really fun, but it doesn't serve you well. Anyways, it was just like weird analogy of this exercise, but that's what I had realized. So I'm like, gosh, I love this HR business. I know we're having good impact. I love these SaaS products. I know they are something, they're all great ideas, and they have to die essentially in order for the rest of the business to live. And that was really when I got present to it. We did another exercise that was, we had somebody in our small group and they did this exercise. You wrote out Mary Had a Little Lamb, and then below it you wrote 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 until you got to the end. And so you did Mary Had a Little Lamb, and then 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, and then you went back and then you wrote M and 1, A and 2, R and 3, Y and 4, until you got to the end. And we timed it. And so when you wrote out Mary Had a Little Lamb and 1 2 3 4, you could do those in like 20 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you did like M and 1, and it took like a minute or a minute and 20. And it was this total exercise on like, if you're bouncing around between different things all of the time, there's so much that's lost in between there that it's hard to catch up. And that's totally what I was doing. So I was working my tail off, right? So I'm working 10-hour days, sort of like bouncing in between meetings. So I've got 1 hour that's set towards this HR business, and then the next hour I'm in a meeting about recruiting, and it was just it was too tough. So those two exercises, one realizing that even though it's beautiful, it has to end.
I need to hear more about that. A dying puppy dog that you just gave away. But that second one, I've never really had someone describe it that way. But that, like right in front of your eyes, if you're doing that, you're just making everything 5 times harder. The first exercise, I don't get it. So you're giving away a puppy dog. Like, explain that one a little more.
Yeah, the actual one, this is like I think it's a really rough exercise, and it probably comes out of context, but it was like killing the puppy. That was the exercise. So it like, you brought somebody in, and I think he was sharing about a previous exercise that he did, but it was this analogy of like, you've got something beautiful and you like love this puppy, and you would like never end it. And he's like asking this girl, like, oh, I think gave her a stuffed puppy, like, here's the stuffed puppy. And he was like, you love the puppy? And she was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I love the puppy. He's like, yeah. And he was like, you pet it, you want to keep it for? He's like, yeah, absolutely. And he was like, okay, now you have to kill the puppy.
What I was missing there is I didn't quite understand the point, but you kind of said it earlier. You loved your HR business as if it was a puppy.
Yeah.
But the reality is you had to put it to bed for you to ultimately accomplish Potere Search's real competitive advantage and goal, so that you could actually fulfill your mission statement. That's a really interesting, and all of us entrepreneurs go through that. I could tell you 5 different examples where I had convinced myself that we were doing the right thing, we're keeping this, and we got to keep doing this. But the reality is maybe deep down, it was simply I was too attached. I was too emotionally attached, and I needed that outside force to say, it can be money. It can be someone else that you trust, love, respect, who's done it before and says, you're an idiot. What are you doing? You got to get rid of that. I find that as a constant battle for an entrepreneur, because you're always wanting to go in different. Has that been your experience, or now that you've focused, you've been able to put blinders on and just go 100 miles forward?
Yeah, I love it today. By the way, like, I've got a goal and a mission, and I know what we're trying to accomplish this year, next year, the next 5 years, and I love it. But like, you give me a job, you give me a task, like, I'll go and do it. Um, and so I'm really happy now, and I enjoy it, and like, I don't want to do anything else ever. What I've realized in looking back is that think my ego, or what I describe as my ego, has really driven a lot of the business. And my ego is probably what started the business to begin with, thinking that I can do it better than all of these other people that were arguably pretty successful, right? That built like these good businesses and they're doing well. Like my ego is telling me like, Nick, you can do it better. Nick, you can do it better. You can do it better than this. You know how to do it. And so that was probably a large reason of why I got started. Now, that may
And that's not a bad thing.
not a bad thing because it got me started.
Yeah.
Yep.
But you found that also at some point was a detriment. Why?
Because I wouldn't listen. Like I had those blinders on of like, nobody can knock me off of this.
Yeah.
This is what we're going to do. Even if the tea leaves, if things look different or wrong, I'm not going to pay attention to them. I'm not going to listen to them. That's what we're going to go and do. And I just didn't, that was it.
You hit on something that, number one, I'm not sure we really ever have hit on much on this podcast, which I think is such an important point, especially for us as males. We have an ego. And not that females don't have an ego, but it's generally attributed to us, dominant, confident, kind of a little bit arrogant maybe. And so we don't listen as well as we need to. And usually what gets us to listen are economic forces or kind of getting to the brink of destruction. Same thing happened to me. What's confusing about that is I study a lot of entrepreneurs, obviously interview tons of entrepreneurs, is you hear both sides being said. You got to stick to your guns and ignore what everybody says and it'll pay off. And there's a million examples of where that's true. Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, you just go down the line. But then on the other side, you have people saying, well, that's your ego and you're not listening and you're going to fail. And there's lots of examples of that. How in the heck are you supposed to know which piece of advice you're supposed to follow?
I love education, by the way. And so personal development learning is really critical. And so I think it's important to always be learning. It's a huge part of like why I'm still here today and we're still in the business today and how I started it. So I took a seminar about 6 months before I started the business. And so that's when I'm like really like deeply reflecting on myself and looking at myself to start this. And so I don't think if I was willing to listen or willing to learn in that moment that I would have ever started the business, because I got something out of that development and that learning that allowed me to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And then over the years, and especially recently, like within the last couple of years, I've really upped my development game or my learning game. So I've got a therapist. I do landmark education. I do EO, get the accelerator group. I go to church. I've got that. So I've got like the support group that really lifts me up, and I trust them. And that's the group that I trust. And so I'll look to them and they hold a mirror up to me. And I was in a small group meeting a few months ago and their facilitator was like, "Man, you're being a victim." And I'm like,
He just called you right
call
out.
me right out. I'm complaining about some of my business. She's like, "You're being a victim." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you're totally right. I am." And then I changed it. But I don't know if I would have listened to that off somebody off the street. If somebody in just a normal life would have shared that with me, I don't know if I would have been open to listening to it. So for me, I can't say what everybody else should do or where they should go. But at least for me and my story, I found people that I trust, that I respect and I appreciate. I don't do everything that they say.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have to. And that's probably a bigger revelation that I've had in the last year. It really took me a while to do that. Is I think for the first 5 years that I ran the business, I really relied on a lot of other people to tell me what to do or to influence maybe different decisions and things. And what I've taken in the last year is like, here's what we're out to accomplish. Here's what we want to do. How do you think that I can accomplish that? How do you think that I can do it? And we'll assign them more specific areas. So at least for me, it's a matter of like I've got my values identified. I know what I want to go out and accomplish. I know it's there. I've got people around me and programs and structure that hold me accountable to doing that and also hold up the mirror. And I listen to it because I trust and appreciate it. But if my natural bent probably too is like I got an ego and I know that I want to accomplish this and I'm going to go. And so maybe there is a balance there, or maybe I do both between like just going for it and running and also listening to people.
I don't even know, Nick, if you realized how much you just encapsulated what the journey of an entrepreneur is in what you just described. So I want to focus on two elements there. Number one, introspection. That is, for me, and I think based on what you're saying, and for every entrepreneur, sometimes the hardest realization that you eventually have to come to through whatever means is you have to stop blaming everybody else, no matter what your history is, no matter what your background is, no matter what the external forces that are happening to you in this world. You have to stop blaming other people and then stop lying to yourself and then be willing to change and be honest. And then the second piece, which you just said so beautifully, is you have to find the people you trust to help you do that introspection. I mean, you have to do some your own, but you need trustworthy people who care enough about you and what you're doing to say, Nick, knock it off. You're being a victim here. And you won't listen to them if you don't have that trust. And they're not going to tell you if they don't actually love you and care about you and want to help you accomplish, not for selfish motives or for any of those reasons, but for simply genuine human motives. So thank you for sharing that, because that for me, that is an epiphany in all the conversations I've done, that you just encapsulated those two pieces so eloquently. I want to touch on the question that I asked you, how do you know which one, which you also answered very well. What I heard you say is basically you let everybody else dictate what your strategy was. And you realized in year 5, this is my business. I have to dictate the strategy and the culture from the top. And then I need to get people involved for the more tactical, operation based measures to help me accomplish the strategy. But you, as the owner of the business, had to be the one to lay that down and be the driving force and have people help you execute it. Is that a fair assessment of that?
Yeah.
I think the way you said that, for me, and I was thinking, how is he going to answer this question? Because I'm often confused. Okay, so I'm supposed to listen to someone, but then I'm supposed to ignore what they're saying because I got to trust myself. What I will say, and I'm curious your take on this, talk to me about gut. Talk to me about the development of your gut over the last 6 years.
The development of my gut has more been the development of my values and who I am in the world and who I want to be. That's really the gut. Because like if it, otherwise it's ran by feelings and emotions. Otherwise it's ran by like whatever I feel like in the moment, or whatever my emotions are. Maybe I don't feel like going to work. Maybe I don't feel like giving somebody a deal. Maybe I don't feel like listening to somebody. Maybe I don't feel like, my feelings and emotions ran things. I don't know where I would be or what I would be doing. Who knows?
Politicians, are you listening? Oh, sorry, that was an aside.
That's what I've discovered, and what I've really worked on a lot is like, what are my values? What are my core values? What do I want to accomplish? What do I do? And then every decision is filtered through those. Like, does this align with my values? Does this align? And I'm not saying that I'm perfect. This is always like a work that I'm on it, but that's been the development of my gut, is that it's like, and it gets really fast. It doesn't know, like, I can make decisions really quickly now because I've been working on this like value-based decision making, and what I'm doing. So I can do it really fast, and that's really the development of the gut. And then I can look back over time and realize that, like, yeah, I did follow my values, and that's how I got to where I wanted to be.
Why do you think? I think the word values, it's so overused in today's day and age. But to your previous story, you had this third company and they portrayed or marketed all these values, but the reality was very different. Why do you think, but actually having true values, why do you think people just throw that around, and when push comes to shove, they will throw away their values for money, when in the long run, it's been proven time and time again that we as humans, when you stick to core values, which quite frankly, we all know right and wrong, that is how God has created us. And when you stick to those core values, you ultimately accomplish 50 times more what you were trying to accomplish than if you sacrifice those values for short-term monetary gains or whatever the short-term gains are.
I think most companies focus on developing core values, and like, here are our company core values for different reasons, and they almost completely miss personal values. because there are company values. So what I think oftentimes what happens is it's like vision, mission, values. So it's like vision, what is the world that you want? Mission, what are you going to go accomplish? And then values are how do you need to act in order to go and accomplish that? And who are the people you need to do that? So I think that's what a lot of companies focus on. They're like, here are our values, here's what we need to be, here's what we focus on. And they really miss on developing personal values. And that's been a big thing for me. And I've did that for a while too, is here are the company values and cool follows. And I totally missed of like, what do I value as an individual? And what do I value as a person? What do I want to do? Because ultimately a company is, you're made off of individual decisions and individual decision making. So yes, you have the company core values, but also you have people that are out there executing relative to those. So I think like if I had some advice for that, I would focus more on like developing people as individuals and what do they want to accomplish and what are they growing on, or growing into, right? Learning or changing in capacity. And then people will just naturally follow the values. And I think there's a much greater connection to that because in the workplace we see, and granted, I'm involved in hiring, right? Much more than anything else. But I think like once you get to the workplace that a lot of things are elevated, like motions and feelings and like who you are kind of elevated, and it shows up a lot more in that space. And so being able to have your personal core values and align to that bringing into work, I think is a big thing. So I think, sorry, just to summarize that, that's where people miss. So there's the company core values, they focus on that and totally forget that like people need to be developed too, and they need support and structure.
That distinction is so important. And I'm glad that you brought that up because even, you hear it's so easy to get, well, you're going to start a company. And what do you hear? Okay, well, you got to follow your business plan. What's your mission statement? And what are your values? And what is your strategy? And when you just said that, I'm not sure I've ever seen on a business plan, what are the personal values that you plan on helping people as individuals accomplish through your company? That's never been on any business plan that I've ever seen. And that's what really makes companies run because it's just a collective group of individuals who all have different wants and needs and values and goals in life working to accomplish whatever that mission statement is. So thank you for breaking it down that way. I want to get into some more Andrew's pessimistic views of hiring and work ethic in the 21st century in 2024.
Yeah.
You're in hiring. The average individual used to stay at a company for, I'm going to make up a number because I don't actually know what it is, but 30 or 40 years, our parents or our grandparents. Now the average age is, you probably know, 1.5 years or 2 years. It's all this bouncing around. And there's this mentality that I see, perhaps not knowledgeably based, but in so many people that I've talked to, there has been a shift in work ethic mentality with my generation and below. What do you think is going on? And what are you seeing from your perspective and as an executive recruiter as it relates to that?
Things in society are better today than they've ever been before. So as an economy and as a society, we're better than ever before. So there's more
from a GDP perspective.
Yeah. I think
standard of living perspective is what you mean.
Correct. From a standard of living
Yep.
perspective, things are better now than ever before. There's more wealth that's out there now than ever before, more opportunities and resources. And so people are, the satisfaction level hasn't changed, by the way. And that's where we kind of look at. So as they've tracked like job satisfaction level, it really hasn't changed. But the reason why people are bouncing around more today or moving around or they're more vocal about it is because there's more opportunity, is that there are more jobs than there are people. And so companies are more reliant on people than people are relying on those jobs. And so it allows them, in order to get away with some things that they may not before. And so you can quit a job after only being there for a year and go start at another company, is that you've got more like control and power, I think, now than before. So back when people used to work at companies for 30 or 40 years, one, because there were more large companies before. And so today it's easier to start a business. There are more small businesses and mid-sized businesses today than before. So before there were like big businesses and people worked there forever, 30 or 40 years, maybe because you couldn't get a job somewhere else. There wasn't as much opportunity.
Okay.
So it was harder to go get a job somewhere else. So like the satisfaction level was kind of the same, but people weren't likely to change jobs because there was less opportunity that was out there.
Wasn't there a greater sense of loyalty to a company back in the 50s, 60s, 70s?
I wasn't around
Well, okay.
during that time, but from what I've read and experienced, that people just the treatment, the culture and the treatment of people, I don't think was any better then, but people just worked together for longer because there was less opportunity to go other places, and that's like what you did was work at the one company.
How come, and this is a statement I'm going to make from my perspective and my experiences as an employer uh, for going on 15 years in multiple industries, the sense of responsibility, the sense of care, and I'm generalizing, so I want to be careful there, but the overall sense of work ethic seems to have declined. Is my perspective off? Am I missing something? Do I need to think about it in a different way? And I've talked to so many people. I used to work in public accounting in one of the big four, and I told them this staffing model will never work because these generations, mine and the next upcoming generations, will not work 90 to 100 hours a week for this pay. They don't care that much about work. And so I say work ethic, but I want your perspective on it has definitely shifted over the last 50 or 60 years, the values and what have you. And has that had an impact on work ethic? So, what I'm trying to say is the generations of today don't really care as much about work. You know,
Oh, I got you.
even when I went into the industry, it was okay, you put in your time for 5 years, 10 years, you
Yeah.
do 100 hours a week, and then you can move up and then you can eventually accomplish the life you want and support your family. Now, all these people are bouncing around, and what I heard you say, it was because of opportunity,
Mm.
but I actually see a lot of people bouncing around. Yeah, sure, there's opportunity, but that doesn't mean it's the right move to make,
Oh, totally.
but they're still doing it.
Yeah.
So what would you say to all those people what would you say to the people who say, well, I can move here for higher money or I can bounce to this job? The average time that someone lasts in a business is dramatically shorter than it used to be. I think that's a bad thing. What is your take?
Yeah, I agree. I think the longer that people can be in one business, the greater impact that they can have, and probably the greater that they will receive as well. And so I think the feelings are about the same. I think job satisfaction level is about the same. I think loyalty is about the same. But you know,
You
fifth,
think job loyalty,
yeah,
Nick, in 2024,
hmm
from a worker towards the company, and then I want to talk about from the company towards the worker, and maybe that
hmm
is the same as in 1950, 1960, 1970, when people stayed at those companies for 20, 30 years and they felt a sense of responsibility or obligation to help support the mission that that company was doing. And that's part of the reason that they stayed there so long.
I don't know that that was the case. I think that those people would have changed jobs if they had the opportunity.
Okay. Okay.
But
So
they didn't. There weren't other jobs in order to go to, as well as you had a deep need. So there wasn't as much wealth, there wasn't as much money, there wasn't as much resources out there. So you had to be relying on that job. And if you lost that job, you didn't know when the next job was going to come along, and you had to fight for it and you had to be there. Today you can find another job. So I think the loyalty and the dedication is probably about the same, but the obligation is different today. So you're not as obligated to that company. You're not as obligated to what they're doing. You don't have to be there because you can go to another company. You can go to another company. You can go to another company. I wouldn't recommend you do that because oftentimes it's just watching the same movie in a different theater,
yeah,
right? So you're
the
just,
grass isn't always greener. It almost never is.
and it could catch up to you as well. It's not bad to change jobs. And there are a lot of people that would say in your 20s, you should. It's almost like a liberal arts education of like, try this job for 2 years, try that job for 2 years, try that one for 2 years. So you can try 4 different jobs after you graduate college before you hit the age of 30, and you've tried different things. So then you know what you really want to do. And that could set you up for a good career. It's possible. Some people find it right away. But what I would encourage those people to do is find your dream job. What really lights your fire? What do you really like to do? What do you really want? And not because it's like something that you obviously in values-based decision making, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like relative to your core values and what really means a lot to you in life, what is your dream job? And then go do that. Go find that, because that's what leads to the amount of time that people will lead in the company, right? So if somebody shows up to their dream job, if they're like, oh my gosh, I got to be at this job, this is so amazing, they'll do whatever it takes in order to be there. They'll do whatever it takes in order for that company to be successful. And the satisfaction with those people is different, right? They go home and they're like happy with their family. They stop by the grocery store and they're like chatting with the people that are working there, and they're just a totally different perspective. And so if you get that, like there's just something that magical that happens. But when people aren't attached to their dream jobs, that's when they quit. That's when they leave. That's when they steal from the company, either through time and payroll or directly out of the cash register or something else. They're, talking poorly about leadership and the water coolers and all these other bad things that happen, is because they don't really care about the work and what they're doing. And that's really the thing that matters to people, is the work itself. And so we're gonna there's this thing of like beer kegs and ping pong tables and sleep pods and all this crazy stuff. It doesn't change job satisfaction level at all. If anything, the leading research shows it distracts and it like decreases job level satisfaction. So the only thing that really matters is the work itself and people really caring about that work.
Nick, that is an incredible perspective. And even for me, I've had this uh, pessimistic view on my generation, some of the generations below me. They're not as dedicated. They don't want to work as much, which may be true, but that's because they value things differently, which can be very good. But you said something that just kind of turned a key in my mind. All that it's the work. It's the work that they're doing, and the dream job. Now I'm going to push back a little bit. Okay, I'm an artist, Nick. I want to be an artist, and that's my dream job.
Mhm.
What advice would you tell me?
There are options. So perhaps the art that you're creating, people really do love, and it pays a lot and it fulfills like your needs and circumstances there. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe people don't love your art as much that they're willing to like pay a lot of money for it. So maybe you start an art company. Maybe you start an art gallery. Maybe you work for an art company or a gallery. Maybe you work for a company that really cares about it. You can find that in a lot of different areas for work if you look for it.
What if I don't have the money to start my own company?
What do you mean you don't have money to start your own company?
That's a huge hurdle for a lot of people that want to start their own company. There's a lot of aspiring artists that would love to start their own gallery, but they don't have the money.
Okay.
How do I find my dream job?
Run somebody else's gallery, have somebody else fund your gallery, start sidewalk gallery, where you've just got your easel and some paints and you're in a park. There's ways to get started and to get rolling. You don't have to wait for people. Just in I'm more of like Gestalt mindset, so I want to talk more about like my experience and what I've done versus what other people should do. I started Potere Search with $100, and we've never put a dime extra into the business. It's
Really?
total sweat equity. Now, granted, there have been periods where I didn't get a paycheck.
Yeah.
Small periods. It hasn't never been too extensive, but I don't know. So like, and the only reason why I put $100 in is because the bank required $100 to open up the checking account, and I remember kind of being, I'm like, man, I really don't want to give him this $100 because I didn't have that much money to begin with, anyways. But I gave it to him, and we've just added to it ever since.
What you just highlighted is options, and
Yeah.
I've always been frustrated that people always say, "Oh, go find your dream job," and if you do what you love every day, you won't work a day in your life. And my thought process has always been, you might have to do some other things that aren't your dream job, maybe things you hate, quote unquote, to get yourself to a position for you to be able to do your dream job. But I think you gave a great example of an artist who maybe doesn't come from money, doesn't have any money. Okay, you want to own your own art gallery. That doesn't mean you can do it tomorrow. If you have the resources, fantastic. And there are varying resources out there, but you can start learning the industry and you can start getting the experience like you did in the executive recruiting industry by working and learning from someone else. At least for me, that's such an eye opener, because it might not happen overnight, but if you plan and you get into the industry that's your dream industry, you can get to that dream job in time where you're not working a day in your life. A lot of people just think, well, I don't have the money, so I can't do it. Okay. If that's where you're going to stop, then is this really your dream job? But if it is, you're going to find a way to ultimately get to it. Is that the approach you take when at PS, Potere Search, when you are trying to match candidates with employers? Or what is PS doing differently?
a lot of the secret sauce is attaching people to their dream jobs. That's really a lot of it. So the first conversation that we have with people that are interested in the job that we're representing is we ask them, they don't know the company name, they don't know what the right answers to say, but we just talk about them. Like, what do you really want out of your work? What do you enjoy working on? I talk about it as a dream job because that's how most people
Yeah.
kind of think about it. Like, oh, you've been told that. So that's a lot of it. And we try and attach that to the work itself. And so when somebody describes their dream job and it's opposite of what the job really is, they may be the most qualified person for that job. They're not the right fit. And so, and obviously we're trying to find good skill sets. We find people that are skilled, they can do the job. They're probably of the top 5%. And this is also their dream job. So we talk about it with them. That's a big part. We also work with good companies. And I think that's a huge part. So our clients are arguably some of the best companies that I've ever worked with. And I've worked at Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, some of the like really, really big companies out there. And I love the companies that we work with.
What does that mean? Everybody says they're a good company. What does you work with good companies mean? Can you give us some specificity to what you define as a good company and why you work with them?
Yeah, of course they've got like the right marketing material, right? So they're all saying that they're doing good work in the world and they're best places to work and they get awards and things for that. Um, they all have positive intent. I think that's the thing that I've looked at is that all of the owners of the companies that we work for and the executives that we work with, they all have positive intent. None of them walk on water. None of them are perfect. They don't do everything correct. But they all have positive intent. They want to do good work and they're dedicated to it. And so they want to do that over time. And so they're doing a positive work in the world. So whatever business that they've created, they're like, man, this is going to have a positive impact. And we work with a lot of different industries, right? Like it's all across the board and you can have a good impact anywhere. So it's then, and also they want to be a good place to work. So they want to create a good home for their employees and their staff members. And I think that's a lot of, there's like two elements are kind of it. Another bigger part is that we pursue all candidates. And so we don't like just take whoever comes to us or whoever shows up or whoever's in our Rolodex. We have proactive methods that consider everybody who's qualified for the position, and then we narrow it down to the best of the best. And a lot of the best of the best is like their attachment to the work and their fit for that exact role. And so that's what we do. And it's like a researcher. That's how I feel like most days, like a detective,
Yeah.
right? So I want to figure out everybody that's qualified for this role. Where are they? Where are they at? How can I get their attention to get a yes or a no?
Mhm.
I'm interested or I'm already in my dream job. And then how do I figure out what really makes them tick? Like what do they really like and roll? And most people don't even recognize that. I kind of do it through like a natural conversation,
Yeah.
but they don't realize of like how I'm guiding them through the conversation and what I'm getting out of it.
That's
Because we
fantastic.
really want to figure out what means a lot to them. And in interviewing, like these people are smart. We're dealing with the top five, at least what we deal with the top 5% of people that are skilled at these roles. They know the right things to say.
Yeah.
They know the answers, right? They know what to do and you win it over. So how do we get them in a place where they're just authentic? They're
Yes.
just really themselves and they're just telling real things.
Authentic. You use that word that I believe is missing so much in corporate culture. But when you can identify the authenticity of an individual, the authenticity of a company, and marry them together, it's an incredible thing. Do you have a screener for the companies that you work with? What I mean by that is, have you ever had a company that's come to you and in your due diligence and research said, I don't think we're the best fit for you because of they didn't meet that definition of a good company and you didn't think you'd be able to help them?
Yeah.
What aspects or characteristics did you identify? Not you can think of a particular one or
Yeah.
just in general. Do you see with companies where you look at them and say, that's not a good fit for us?
There's two that come to mind. One that we didn't work with that we found out during the due diligence process, and the second one that we worked with and we found out afterwards. So the first one, it was pretty straightforward. And I remember I think it was New Year's Day. I don't know how I remember this, but I remember being like, I don't know why we're talking. It's like New Year's Day, and I'm talking to this head of HR at a pretty big company
Mm-hmm.
that's here, and they were dealing with they were having a lot of difficulty finding the right people and they just couldn't figure it out. They're like, oh, we're not finding the right people. Why this isn't it? We're dealing with a lot of turnover.
Were they trying to do it on their own, find people on their own?
Yeah, I think they were doing it on their own at that
Okay.
point, and their internal recruiter and different things, job postings, different things. And so I made the suggestion. I'm like, well, maybe we ought to figure out how people feel about your company, or maybe we should feel about like how people feel about your job and your role. So like discover why people aren't interested and why then
That's good.
soft, dead cold. I don't care about their experience. That was the response from their head of HR. Like, no, I don't care about their candidate experience. I don't care what they say. We just need to fill seats. We need to put people in the role.
They just said that to you. They don't care.
I'm like, well, I don't think we're a good fit.
Is that what you said?
That's literally what I said. Yeah. So she said that. I said, I don't think we're a good fit. We're not going to work together.
Over.
That was it. Yeah.
Nick, how can companies hold that position? That's not even a tenable position in this day and age and still function. Explain that to me.
They're not very successful. I've kind of watched them over years. They haven't grown a whole lot or done much from where they're at currently. The second company, so we figured it out later, right? And we were relatively early on in starting our company.
So you hired them or worked with them?
So we started working with
Okay.
them. We actually hired somebody into their company to kind of senior level, and we were doing some other work with them. And that's when it came up of like the risky things financially that they were doing with a company. They were putting in a really risky financial spot. Some of the services that their product or service that they were giving wasn't exactly what it said that it was. So
Was
there
it
was
fraud?
I don't think it was fraudulent, but kind of a gray area where like maybe morally you shouldn't be doing that, and borderline fraud. I'm not an investigator. I don't necessarily know, but it probably could have been looked at and like, hey,
not fraud in the legal sense. It didn't feel right.
It wasn't right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you do? So you put someone in the company.
Yeah.
And then you found this out later through that individual, or as you continued to work with this company that you found that out?
As we continued to work with them, we found it out, and then we stopped working with them.
What do you think what are the driving forces to culture? Because what you're really talking about and the companies you want to work for are really the companies who see the importance of culture and put an emphasis on culture, and that the people that are involved are really what make up the culture.
Everybody's got kind of a different definition of culture, I feel like, but I identify with yours a lot, and it's sort of what it feels like to work there and like what the intent is. And I think that's a lot of what makes the difference is like, what's the intention, and then how are you going about it? And I think a lot of it comes from the top in personal development. So what I've noticed of the senior most leaders, so it could be your CEO, your CFO, COO, could be owner, about those people that are working on themselves and improving themselves and wanting to get better, typically have the best cultures. And then people typically follow in line with that because they want to learn and grow and get better. And when people are learning and growing and get better, they don't have an ego, and they don't know it all.
Yeah.
And they're not dictating how things should go. And there's just this like really nice thing that happens there. People are kind of discovering it. If you get a leader, senior most leader, CEO, CFO, COO, owner, somebody that like is not developing themselves and all they want is something from the company. Hey, you've got to do this. And that's typically how it ends up being. Like, I can't believe you would do that, and you should be doing this. And there's a lot of finger pointing and blaming, and things are kind of tough. But I think that the cultures are the ones that have got like this element of humility where they're in learning mode, and we don't have it all figured out, and we're going to try and get better, and the continuous improvement. That's what I really appreciate, because those two people typically are more able to be authentic and to be open and be true to like what's really happened to them. And I like people that are honest, and not honest like you're brash or you're swearing or you're like doing these things where you're just like, here's what I'm experiencing, here's what I've got going on, here's what's there, and just being really honest about that. But with the honesty, you have to be true to yourself. You have to know what you're trying to express. So I think with culture, anyways, to say that, I love the senior most leaders that don't know it all, that are in learning mode, they're in discovery, and they're working on themselves. That's like the best for me.
That introspection again. Why is it so hard for us as humans to do that? Because that's often required in relationships, in friendships, in business, in everything. But why is it so hard for us to do that, Nick?
We're in survival mode. What we're out to do is to survive. And so we don't want people that are like attacking us or that are harmful to us. And we're like trying to protect ourselves. And sort of, I guess I'm not a psychologist, but that's what my guess would be, is that we're always in survival mode. We're like trying to protect ourselves and be reserved in some sort of way.
So we put our walls up.
Put our walls up.
completely shifting gears, and this is a broad question. Talk to us about AI and how you see it impacting society as a whole, especially for you, resume making, hiring, so many areas in the HR side.
Yeah.
What do you see happening?
It's an amazing tool, and it's already changed our industry, and it's changed work, I think, for that matter too. And we're noticing more times now that people are implementing AI tools in different products and tools as opposed to people. I got the first question, I think it was 5 years ago, where I was sitting down with a senior executive of a company, and he asked me for a robot instead of a person. Happened 5 years ago. He's like, they had a big operation in China, and they were trying to move positions from China to the US. And so he's like, I want 3 products that do this, or 3 tools that do this, and then 1 person to oversee them. Could you help me do that? And that was the first time that I heard about it. And then it's come up, and obviously a lot more over the last year as AI and machine learning have becoming a lot more prevalent. So what I'm seeing as far as specific in work in general, it's changing. People are thinking about it at a lot of different positions. Like, do we need a tool as opposed to a person? Or how can we give some people some tools in order to maximize their work and their output? Now, where a lot of companies are against that is where the leaders are like, why would I buy a product to make my employees' lives easier? Why would I do that? Shouldn't they? That's why I hired them.
Wait,
Right.
wait, wait, wait. There are leaders that say, why should I buy a tool that will make my employees more efficient and their lives easier? And they're
Mhm.
against that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because why did I hire? And I'm not saying this is correct, but the thought process is like, well, I hired the employee to do the job. They should do the job. Why do I need to then hire a tool or purchase a tool as well and plug it in? And so it happens a lot in work where there are a lot of leaders that don't give education or don't give AI or don't implement some of these things because they're like, well, I hired the person to do it. Shouldn't they do it?
For all you leaders out there, don't let that be you. I can't, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, that you have a tool. Like, it's the antithesis of business. We have a tool that's going to make my employees' lives and their jobs more efficient and happier. Why should I want that? That's happening. You're telling me this is happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are they afraid of? They
I
don't
did,
want their employees to be happier?
we did a head of HR search recently, at the end of last year, for like one of our larger clients. And this is a typical role that we do, head of HR search. And so I made it a point. I asked every single candidate, how are they using AI and machine learning? So this is Phoenix-based company. So Phoenix-based company, the heads of HR that we're interviewing are here in Phoenix. I ask every single person, as amongst other things, right? Like, how are you using AI and machine learning? 90% of them, I figured 90% of them were like, that's a buzzword. Oh, it's just, I know it's what people are talking about today, but it's not going to last. It's just a buzzword. It's just something flashy. 90% of them said that. So 90% of and granted, I didn't talk to all of the heads of HR, only people that were interested, but I was pretty shocked. One, it made my job really easy because I'm like, well, we only have to focus on 10%. And we're not asking them to be the experts in AI machine learning by any means,
Yeah.
because they're heads of HR. They don't need to be into that, but that they're open to learning, that they're open to discovering, and they're like trying this product. And so what we're seeing specifically within hire, and this is kind of easy because I'm in hiring, so it's a part of HR. Um, it's made our lives a lot easier, and also I think some other companies in our industry are reliant too much upon it, and it's adding a lot of like error and risk. Where I think it works out really well is in writing job descriptions. Like, it used to take probably 2 or 3 hours to write a job description. Now it takes 15 or 20 minutes. So we can pump out job descriptions a lot easier. We do exercises for positions. So when people are like final stage interview, they do an exercise before they go into interview. We can pump those out really easily. Um, there's and then the identification and the outreach is what's changed a lot as well. So like, you can find anybody now. Nobody can be hidden with AI and machine learning. Few clicks of a button, you can find everybody, navigate that. So that's how we're using it today, is like the identification of who are the best candidates, who are the best people, and then some automation and some of the outreach as well. And we've had to like kind of hold back on some of those things too, because I've noticed that there's quite a bit of error in those as well. So there's probably like, at the very best, 10% error. And we can't have 10% error in our business. So if I'm reaching out to a CFO about a staff account role, if I reached out to a CFO, say, hey, you'd be really amazing for the staff accountant role. Are you interested? That CFO
Yeah,
will
never coming back to you.
Never.
I
Yeah.
still can't get. I still fascinated with this 90%. I'm not talking about manufacturing. Heads of HR said it's going to be gone. In HR, do they know what AI is?
Maybe not.
Like, that's one of the industries that it has. uh, uh, When I even think about, okay, I'm looking for an employee that does this. Give me if you're not using Chat GPT for at least idea generation, you are missing out.
Yeah.
You are missing out. I, I don't remember what the circumstances were, but someone wanted help with a resume, and I said, "Oh, okay, let's go to Chat GPT. This is my background. I did this for 5 years. I did this for 5 years. I did this for 5 years, and then I did this. These are my interests. Write my resume in a matter of 20 seconds, less than that." How can someone not want to use that? And again, now I caution a lot of people will just copy and paste. Okay,
Right.
no copying and pasting. This is a
Right.
robot. It's simply there as a tool to help you think through, ooh, I like that, I like that, I like that. And then if you don't like it, I've done it. I'll say, don't like that one, give me a new one. You're telling me that heads of HR don't think this is going to be around forever? Wait, are these, I don't mean to be ageist, but are these people like in their 60s or 70s that are just trying to like stop the train and they refuse to acknowledge that this train is coming whether they like it or not? Or was there any similarities? Not to pine too much on this,
Sure.
but that's absolutely baffling to me.
Me as well. And I think it should be a big conversation of what we're doing at work, and especially within HR and work, because that should be, that head of HR should be looking at the company too, of like, how many of these positions can we automate and use AI or machine learning as opposed to hiring people.
Yeah.
Maybe we could spend 20 grand, $20,000 or $30,000 on a product instead of hiring somebody at $100,000 base salary where your total cost is 150. So some of those things, like, I think the head of HR should be looking at that. A lot of it, they should be like not the expert in code or in writing things or doing things, but like at least being able to explore that and shopping on different products. I did so speaking of this, last year I did a search solely using ChatGPT as far as the direction goes. So I had this, and I don't even remember which search it
Hmm.
was, but
Hmm.
we had a client that was looking for an executive role, and ChatGPT was kind of getting big at the time. Like, people are using it a lot, and it's rolling out, and I'm using it a lot too. I'm getting interested. I'm like, what would it be like to run a search to find somebody solely through ChatGPT? And I'm like, well, let's just try it out. And so I punched it, so we get like the job requirements, right? So I talked to the client. I get everything that they're looking for and who's the ideal person. And I plug a lot of that into ChatGPT. So I'm like, hey, here's the type of company. And I don't write in the name of the company or any identifying markers. We use generalities. But I'm like, here's the type of company that we're hiring for. Here's the type of position. And here's ideally what we're looking for. And then the first question was, would you please write a job description? And then it punches out this like job description, and yeah, I edit it. I don't copy and paste it, right? So I edit it and put it in our format, and I'm like, great, now I've got a job description. Well, now I need to write a job advertisement, so I need to go like share the marketing
Hmm.
material, and I need to start reaching out to people. So you could create that same thing, punches out the thing, create that. I'm like, cool. um, Now I need to, how do I talk to people? So what are they interested in? Like, what should I be saying to them, or what should the messaging be when we talk? And it punches out this thing of like, here's what people in this field and this role are really interested in, and this is what they
That
really
is
like in a
so
sale.
incredible.
And I'm like, great, okay, cool. Now I've got I've got the job description, I've got the marketing material, I've got the messaging, I know what I'm going to say. Like, who do I reach out to? So I asked ChatGPT, like, where do I find these people? Where do I look at them? And then it pumps out like the top 10 companies that hire these types of people, and the top like 3 or 4 sources in order to find them. And I'm like, great. And so I just followed ChatGPT through that. And I think at the end I asked them like, hey, we're having a difficult time choosing between these two people. Like, we're thinking about this type of person and we're thinking about this type of person. And and it was still in the same thread as that job. I'm like, who would you hire? I don't know if we took their recommendation or not, but it was just sort of at every point I'm like working with ChatGPT through this. And eventually it could be like that. There's probably somebody out in there are people probably out there creating products that are like that, that
Hmm.
you're now chatting to a product or an AI interacting with them as opposed to an executive recruiter like myself.
Do you worry about the viability of the executive recruiting industry based on the descriptions that you just gave us and all of these automations?
No.
And why?
I think I'll be the person using the tools. What our job is transitioning to is advisor as opposed to doer. And a lot in the past, that's what we were. So the executive recruiter was like a resume source. And so people didn't know how to find other people. They didn't know like where they were. So you had to go to a recruiter because they knew where people are. Well, today with AI and machine learning, everybody's visible and you can contact everybody, right? They're out there. So the role of the recruiter is less of a database and less of a like, oh, you've got somebody or who do you have? And it's more of an advisor of like, here's what I want to do. Here's what I'm out to accomplish. Who do you think that I should hire? And then who's the best one? So it's going to be a lot more about identification of who is the best person. Because now you can find everybody, right? So if you've got everybody and you can access everybody, now you need to find the best. Because why would you hire anybody other than the best?
Yep.
Doesn't make sense. You don't want to hire just anybody. You want to hire the best. So how do you do that? And I think that's what the role of the executive recruiter will be. I think we can, probably over time, like there'll be less cost expensive. So I think the cost of using an executive recruiter will go down because we're using a lot of these tools. I think it'll be a lot easier. It'll be accessible for more companies as well. It's expensive to use an executive
Small
recruiter
companies
today.
can't do it.
Small
Yeah.
companies can't. And maybe with AI and machine learning, then we can create something where like more companies could have this access, and it'll be more about being an advisor. So I'm actually really excited about it. I don't think it'll wipe out our industry by any means. I think it's a $130 billion a year industry in the United States alone. Like it's going to take a lot to disrupt that entire industry. But I think the tools will allow us to do our jobs a lot better. I think I'll be able to make a lot more connections, like Yan and Tom that we talked about at the very beginning, and other people that we've had that with. I think it'll make it easier for me to be able to do that, and I think it'll just help our business blow up.
I think it's important for people to hear what you just said. Going back, not to beat a dead horse, but those 90% of heads of HR, it was the fear of the unknown. That's why they're saying, oh, well, it's not going to be around. It was the fear of the unknown. And you just highlighted a lot of people. It's obviously revolutionizing the HR industry, the executive recruiting industry, but you just took the approach it's going to enhance and make our jobs easier, get rid of more of the mundane tasks so we can focus on the psychological and the advisory role, which is really where you want to be, is it not?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
You don't want to be doing all the job descriptions. That'll all be there. I think the other thing that you said that shows your level of authenticity, number one, is you were an executive recruiter that just recommended to heads of HR to figure out which positions do you actually need human bodies for and which ones can you replace with artificial intelligence. And I want to pick on that briefly. You've been very gracious with your time, so I don't want to ask you too many more questions, but that's why a lot of people are afraid of AI. They have this fear that it is going to replace them. That has not been your experience, and you don't believe that's going to be the case in the future. Would you agree with that statement and expound on what you think it's going to do, not just in HR industry, but across all the industries?
I agree. And I think it's necessary. I think AI and machine learning are necessary. There are more jobs than there are people today. So at the time that we're recording this podcast, there's something like 9 million open jobs in the United States. If you look at job postings and everything, so there's something like 9 million open jobs in the United States. So there's something like 6 million unemployed people. So even if you had all of the people that were able and willing in order to go to work, you would still have 3 million open jobs. And I think it's necessary. Like we got to do something with those jobs in order to continue to function as a society, in order to continue to grow as a business, in order to continue to expand and our impact and make up. I think we have to use it. So I don't think it's one of these things of like maybe we could or we can't. I think we have to, because otherwise the positions won't get filled, the jobs won't get done, then our companies won't grow, we won't realize revenue, and then there's sort of some issues there. So I think not only is it, we just have to be open to it.
Yeah, I that's another interesting take. It's necessary. You said something a couple minutes ago that I want to spend a little time on to conclude this AI conversation. A lot of firms are overusing it, and you're seeing that, and there's a lot of risk there. Can you give us a little bit more context around that and words of caution that you're seeing for all of us to think about based on the examples you're seeing in your industry or wherever you're seeing it?
It's a really personal thing, your job and the work that you do. Like it's one of the most personal things to you entirely. And so it's so important to you. It's so personal. And then a machine talks to you and you're like, you're like, this is so important to me. This is how I pay my bills. This is how I provide for my family. This is like the work that I'm supposed to do. And then I'm like, you send a computer to do it?
So instead of a human interviewing that person, they're utilizing AI to do it?
Or even reaching out to them. So I get messages from recruiting firms that are like trying to drum up business or trying to advertise. And I respond to them, I'm like, do you know what they're like, we work with a lot of companies in your industry. I'm like, do you really work with a lot of companies in our industry? I don't think so. And there's just a lot of that. And you talk to private equity owners, partners, you talk to CEOs, CFOs all day long. They're getting messages on LinkedIn and emails about, oh, I got this hot candidate, you should interview them. Oh, would you hire this? Like, people are just inundated with it, and they're like, oh my gosh. So from two different sides, I think people are using it too much with business development and trying to make connections with companies, because ultimately, same thing, those people hire on trust. And so they're only going to use a firm that they trust the person, that they trust the recruiter. Yeah, they've got to have a great process and a
Mhm.
good reputation, but you have to trust them. And so that's only done through a personal connection, not through an AI generated thing. And then also the identification of the out. So as you're talking to candidates about a job, if you're not doing it as a person, that loses the personal touch,
Yeah.
and it's just some computer, and you're like, gosh, you don't realize that. And that's why people get frustrated during the job process. They're searching for a job. They're like, I need a job. I don't have one. I'm searching for it. And then you send me an email that says I'm not a good fit. Like, I talked to you, I have this happen all the time. People interview, they're like, I interviewed the other day, and then you send me an email that says I'm rejected, or just, and so you, it's hard to have the personal touch at every single point and to do it, but
It's impossible, but
it's impossible. You want to do it as much as possible
yeah.
and as much of the human element in there. And then utilizing AI tools for other things, for some of the things that it could do. But I think that's where a lot of people miss, is in a lot of like the connection and the outreach. There's also a lot of video interviewing that's going on today too. People do video interviews as opposed to like personal interviews. And I think those have some merit, but that can be tough as well,
You mean like interviewing someone over Zoom or just having them record themselves?
having them record themselves.
Oh my goodness, what is wrong with these people? Like, I am so sick of AI generated email messages and LinkedIn
Yeah.
messages and all of this garbage. It just makes me close. Now no one can get to me because I'm just getting. How are we
Yeah.
gonna, like? Are we gonna have to? Are we, oh, heaven forbid we give anything to Congress, but are we gonna have to have Congress pass some type of legislation, just like they did with robocalls? Like, is it going to get to that point, or do you think firms will dial themselves back because they'll recognize the ineffectiveness of this mass AI generated email content platform?
Both. It seems like there are some. I'm not a marketing expert, and we've tried all of these tactics too. By the way, we've tried them. Like, maybe they work for other people. We'll do them. And so I've noticed that there's more regulation today, like
Uh-huh.
of like the amount of text messages that you can
Mm-hmm.
send, and
Yep.
types of emails, and even some of the back end filters. Of like what's going to spam and what's coming to your actual inbox has changed a lot. So it's made it a lot more difficult today than it has before. And it seems like that's increasing. It'll just get harder and
Mm-hmm.
harder in order to do that. So then companies will realize the ineffectiveness of it. They're like, it just doesn't work. And then, sorry, what was the second part?
But do you think there's going to need to be legislation to curtail some of the risky use of what we're seeing?
Yeah, it's already happening within hiring too. If you've seen this, so the very first, they're already prosecuting companies for
Really?
uh, what am I saying? Inappropriate hiring, like discriminatory hiring. So it's already happening. People have been prosecuted. People have been successfully charged. Companies have been, for the inappropriate use of AI within recruiting.
So they are using it to discriminate against candidates or pools of candidates and utilizing the information that AI has determined to make a hire, and that process was inherently discriminatory.
How they found out was that one person found this out. So they applied for a job with the first time that they applied, it had the date that they graduated college
Uh-huh.
in it, and they applied and they got rejected. And they applied a second time and removed the date that they had graduated college, and they got an interview
So they were discriminating based on age.
based on age. And it was likely that, and that's how a lot of these things come up, is that you've set parameters, or might
Uh-huh.
be an age thing, or it could be a gender thing, or it could be one of the 7 protected classes. But I think what kind of we're realizing is that these companies were probably discriminatory all along the way. They'd probably been doing this for a long time, and then they just set up their AI tools in order to do the same sort of discriminatory
And
things
it
they were
called
doing
them out.
before. And now it's easier to detect because you've got these tools. That's probably what happens. But yeah, I think there'll be a lot more cracking down on these tools. You already have to, I think it's in the state of New York, you have to advertise if you're using an AI tool in recruiting.
Mm.
It's state law. And I think that law will be adopted at a federal level at some point.
I've seen that in real estate on a lot of listings now, and I think you're required to, if you furnish the house, completely changing topics, but on the topic of AI, if you furnish a house with AI generated content, you have to put, this is the actual house, but we've furnished or staged the entire house with AI generated furniture.
Yeah.
Long story short, AI is going to revolutionize everything. There's a lot of benefits. Obviously, there's some risks that we have to be mindful of as a society.
Yeah.
But if you think it's going away, or you think you're not going to be interacting with it, you already are, more than likely.
So
Um, so if you've never opened up ChatGTP, just try it. I think you'll be blown away at what you can not learn from it, but it just helps. It's like a whiteboard, what do you call a brainstorming session? It's like the best single one-on-one brainstorming session that you can possibly have. Not that you should replace it with people. Nick, is there anything else? We've covered so many topics, and we cannot thank you enough. Some really good perspectives and ways to think about things, not only for entrepreneurs, but just life in general. Is there anything we haven't talked about in particular that you want to share with our audience about anything we talked about, or anything in general?
I just want to emphasize for the entrepreneurs, for the people that are watching, of like the keep going. I think the one thing that we haven't really talked about too much, we talked about the getting started, like what does
Mm-hmm.
it take to get started? And then what does it take to keep going? I think that's one thing that we didn't talk about. And there were certainly several times in my business that it would have made a lot of sense to quit, that it would have been the right time to quit. I'm glad I didn't, and they ended up not being the right time. I'm glad I kept going, but I think that's one thing that I would like to emphasize. And maybe sometimes that we do need to quit, because there have been businesses that I've needed to
Mm-hmm.
end, or aspects of our business that needed to end. But times are hard. Like starting was probably the hardest thing. But then there were at least 2 points in our business that would have made a lot of sense to quit. Would have made a lot of sense to give up the business, and we just kept going. And so, there are challenges that happen. People talk about this, like it's not like the growth of a business and success is not linear. Like it's not always up and to the right. Certainly hasn't been the case for us. It's like we had a lot of success at the beginning, and then a lot of failures, and then a lot of successes, and then a lot of failures. And it's just sort of been this
It's
like
like a
kind of
mountain.
up and down thing. Yeah. But the thing that's been common for us, I think that's probably what I encourage people to do, is like, if you do this business and you do create it, it's got to be so meaningful and special to you that like it has to exist. And that's how I feel about my business. Like it has to exist. The impact that we're having with people and connecting to their dream jobs and helping these companies grow, like it has to exist. And those times where I looked at it and I'm like, it would make a lot of sense to quit right now. It would make a ton of sense to just like end it, go do anything else. And I just looked at, I'm like, no, we got to do it. Like it's got to exist and to happen. And so just finding that thing that will like keep you going and keep you charging, is just really important. And I think being open about it as well. So I love this podcast, is that we're talking about business growth as it's happening. I think a lot of people will like get to the other side and then talk about what just happened. Like, oh yeah, it was really hard last year, but like I got through it, and then we moved on. And it's okay talking about things that are tough in the time. And that's probably where my structure came in a lot, right? With my therapist, and with EO, and with Landmark, and with church, is like those times that were really difficult. They kind of like picked me up and like helped me keep going, during those times. But anyways, I just wanted to emphasize that, is that they're just to keep going, and if it makes sense, and get to the other side. And what I was mentioning is that in those times, it's okay to share it with those people. Like I had a time where I walked in my small group and I'd just like borderline crying, like this sucks, and gone to my therapist. Just hard times that are really hard, and it's okay. And I just feel better, because like things are happening, and good things happen and bad things happen, and it's okay to express it. And it's just nice being open and finding that group where you can be really open and responsive. And that's been my thing. Like I've had some of my best friends, some people that I've like been so close to for the majority of my life, they don't want to talk about my business. They don't want to hear about it. They don't want to be a part of it. They're friends and they're great. And they're like, hey, you doing well? Things good? I'm like, yeah, things are good. They're like, great.
The obligatory ask.
The obligatory ask. And then I get into my entrepreneurs group, I get my small group, and they actually care and they'll listen. And I'll tell them that, bad things are happening, something going on. And they just sort of listen, and so you just kind of have to have that protective state. But that definitely helped me keep going. And I'm glad that we're there today. Not that everything is perfect and, we're great, we're still going. But anyways, I just wanted to emphasize that side of like, keep going. There's some times where you just kind of need something to like keep you going.
You highlighted grit, perseverance, be vulnerable. So many people, so many of us fail because we're not willing to be vulnerable. Find that support group. And lastly, passion for what you're doing. Yeah. Nick, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew. It's good having you.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Andrew Holland Podcast. Never miss an episode by subscribing to and liking our YouTube channel, the Andrew Holland Podcast, and by following and liking the show on your favorite audio platforms. Be sure to connect with us on X, formerly Twitter, A Holland Podcast. That's A Holland Podcast. So you can interact with Andrew, the team, and our guests throughout the week. Thank you again so much for listening. Have a great day, and we'll talk again soon.